Welcome back to the Woven Well podcast. We have a friend of the show here with us today. We've got a previous episode. You have to go a ways back, but I'll make sure to have it linked in the show notes to hear from Laura Ducote. She's a nurse practitioner, and that first episode, she's talking about utilizing restorative reproductive medicine. And now I'm thrilled to say that she is actually a part of our team at Woven Natural Fertility Care, providing pregnancy and postpartum education to women. But for those of you who don't know her, Laura is a wife, mother of 4 beautiful children on earth, Creighton model fertility care practitioner, and of course, family nurse practitioner. Since completing her additional training in Creighton, naprotechnology, and restorative reproductive medicine, she began serving as a nurse practitioner and natural family planning provider for the last decade. And she is here to chat with us. So, Laura, welcome back.
Caitlin, I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you back and just sort of chat together because you and I will often talk about different topics. And I think that listeners would be pretty interested in some of those conversations that we have. Like, we'll just start talking about what I see on client charts or something that you've just read about. And it's like so interesting and informative. And I'm like, man, I bet people would want to listen to this. I bet people would want to know these little tidbits that we get in our personal conversations. So, so I think it'll be fun just to chat.
So true. Yeah, the chart's always telling us things.
That is absolutely right. I was thinking about client charts recently and some of the things like the big patterns that I see. And one of the big things that keeps coming up is just low hormones. So obviously, for anyone listening who does not know, we are both fertility care practitioners. So we see client charts through the Creighton model system all the time. And Creighton is excellent at providing a lot of information. So even little things that you chart every day that you think, that doesn't really tell us much. For somebody who is trained in it, it actually gives an incredible amount of information. So you may come in thinking, I have regular cycles. I don't know why I have painful periods, or I don't know why I'm having trouble conceiving. I have regular cycles. But then we start looking at your Creighton chart and we see a lot of other signs. So you may have low mucus production, or the quality of the mucus could be really limited. So you may have a lot of it, but it's just kind of low quality, or maybe you only have 1 or 2 days of the good stuff. You could have a short post-peak phase, or a lot of spotting leading up to the period really getting started, maybe even some brown bleeding at the end of the period, delayed ovulation. I don't know. I'm just thinking about things that come up in client charts over and over again, and they feel so big. You know, it goes from, oh, I think everything's normal to, oh my goodness, I'm looking at this chart and Caitlin's pointing out all these things. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What stands out to you? Like, when you see those things start showing up on a chart, what does that register for you as you're thinking about clients and patients?
Yeah. Well, first, I just have to acknowledge that sometimes when we think everything is okay with our body and then somebody tells us that it's not, it can be a little bit overwhelming and like almost like,
Yeah.
oh, somebody realized something about me that I didn't even know about myself. Like that can be kind of a strange feeling to take in. And so when we say all of this, we say it with care because,
Yes.
we've learned all of this for a reason. And so, when we're looking at those charts and seeing those signs that you just said, I think the first thing that comes to mind is there kind of uh, an over exercise or a under eating or a over stress? Is there some sort of stressor on the body that is not allowing the hormones to do what they're designed to do? Um, and so when someone like us, maybe, or specifically on my end, on the medical end, is questioning those sorts of things, it especially brings up a lot of emotions when we're talking about stress. Because just naturally. But I think that we do have to recognize that the Lord has given us a great protective mechanism in that our fertility does decline if we're in a very stressful state of life, because it recognizes this is not a great time to have a baby come into the
Mm.
world if the mother is not well. And so when we want to look at these things, we're looking at how can we make the hormones, feel like they are well enough, the body is well enough to produce all the hormones necessary to make these signs on the chart like what we're expecting. So, you mentioned estrogen, and so that's a big one, obviously with the cervical mucus.
Yeah.
But then, also the androgens can be another factor there. And sometimes that one is less to do with the stress and sometimes can be more to do with the age. So
Mm.
I don't know if you see that in your client charts as well, is like, is
Mm.
connected to just when we're getting kind of higher into our 30s that we just start to see some of those things and we maybe just don't know that that can be normal.
And it's such a good reminder. And I love you're talking about stress and eating and lifestyle because it's a reminder that we are, and I say this all the time, complex human beings. We are beautifully designed. And we kind of live in this culture where we're like, just push through it, whatever it is. You can't eat well, just push through it. You can't sleep well, just push through it. You can't incorporate the rest that you want to, just push through it. It's like, wow, it's kind of a beautiful thing that God has built in these reminders that we are worth the time, worth the rest, worth the nutrition. And even if it's not a total life change, those little things, those little decisions that we do each day can have a huge benefit in the end. And I do see changes on a client's chart when they've had all of those stressors, whether they be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, because we really do
Mm-hmm.
have to address
Mm-hmm.
all of those. We see such a difference on the charting in the end. So I do think it's across the board. Um, Although there are lots of ways that we look at increasing those hormones. If we are seeing low hormones, I think you're right. Starting with the basics that we think, oh, basic like unimportant or optional. No, no, no. We mean basic like foundational. Like we
Yes.
have to
Yes.
first have these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of it, we have other options of things we can do.
Right, right. Yeah, rest, good nutrition, proper amounts of exercise, all of those things are good, and just, as there can be in too much of a good thing, it's like we can be really trying to focus on our health and that's what spurs us to be eating, you know, very strict diet or to try to be exercising for our health. And sometimes I see that almost like sabotage us in ways if we're doing too much of it. So say we're trying to eat a very restrictive diet, but we're not getting enough calories in, or we're trying
Mm.
to, exercise well, but then we're over exercising for what like a female body needs. I think we also
Yeah.
have, pretty pretty rough things out there in social media in terms of what our bodies really are supposed to look like. We do need a decent amount of, a healthy body fat percentage as women. Like it's higher than men for sure. And so, I think that those things are for sure important. The other thing that I see though, and that we've talked about before is sometimes the androgen piece. We don't know necessarily where that shows up, or we hear about androgens more so in the conversation of like PCOS. So when we're,
Yeah.
talking more about the low signs of things, we don't really hear as much about that. But that's why I bring up that kind of perimenopause time. Like that is something that's going to decline with age, just naturally. But I am seeing, unfortunately, I'm seeing it a lot in younger women, younger than we should be expecting it to be declining.
Mm.
And that is certainly an area that I have had to do a little bit more research myself, starting to see that. Um, and the main reason that we see those connections on the chart are that testosterone converts into estrogen inside the ovary. And so, as we're teaching women how to chart these estrogenic signs of mucus, that's where you can actually see some of the signs that are likely to be connected, all connected with the androgens
Yes.
and the estrogen. So one of the treatments that we see in our practice is using DHEA supplementation, because DHEA is an androgen that's primarily made in the adrenals, but it's like a precursor to testosterone, so it will increase testosterone, and then from that conversion process also increase estrogen, which should give you increased cervical mucus, more days of fertility on the chart, things like that. But the other thing that I've looked into, because I myself have been in a breastfeeding time and been interested in looking at that, or I've had patients that have been in a breastfeeding time. You typically don't use DHEA during a time of breastfeeding. The only thing that I've really found in terms of being able to naturally boost that DHEA is going back to the things that I was just mentioning, and specifically in the exercise component. If you aren't over exercising, if you're just trying to kind of get things balanced for your body, the weight training component, there is a muscle building component to that testosterone DHEA balance.
I have been seeing and hearing so much about the importance of lifting heavy weights for women. We as women benefit when we lift heavy weights. Again, not to build, well, to build muscle, but not to build obvious muscle. Our hormones really benefit from this. And I love that you're giving two options of things that we can do to naturally increase these, because low hormones just feels very generic. Like being told, hey, you have low reproductive hormones. That is not very empowering. That's like, okay, well, doesn't feel like there's much I can do about that. So the lifestyle picture as a foundation, the what you eat, the how you nourish your body, the rest that you get, de-stressing, those kind of things. And then you have these options of supplements, which everybody loves a good supplement. So, looking into that, or looking into something like, and again, you can find resources out there. I'm eventually going to have a podcast episode. I just don't know when it's going to air about that, because I do think it's important. But DHEA specifically is not one of those supplements that you should just start on your own if you don't know what your hormone levels are.
True.
It can be, in fact, I had a client recently that was on a very high dose of DHEA, and I asked her, hey, did you get that dosage from a medical professional? And she said, no, I just saw it online and heard it was a good thing. And she's taking a very high dosage. And so I encouraged her to, let's wait and get some lab work done first, because it can not go well if you don't actually need it. So that's pretty important first.
Yeah, for sure. I have some women that truly are, especially my younger bodies seem to be very sensitive to supplementation, versus maybe my ladies that are more in the perimenopause, where that could have been the source that she found. It could have been another source. They sometimes will need a slightly higher dosage, but yeah, it really can vary on what dosage I end up giving people. And what your base, like your starting point, is also really matters for which, how high do we need to get you into optimal level? Because if we go overboard, we're putting you more into a hyperandrogenic state, which is almost like a PCOS state, which is, again, not going to be the route we want to go. We're kind of going from one extreme to the other.
Exactly. It's so individualized. Every single person needs something a little bit different. That's not a failure of the system. That's a beauty of the system, that we get to know an individual person and look at her reproductive health in context of her overall life and health, and try to address that specifically. And I think that that is so different. That restorative approach is so different than what you find at most OBGYNs, most reproductive endocrinologists, most IVF clinics. They're called fertility clinics, but I really don't like that term, because it's not really restoring and preserving that couple and that woman's fertility. It's sort of just thinking about, how can we create a baby? And I just think the woman deserves so much more respect than that. And even in something like low hormones, she is going to feel so much better when she gets that
Yes.
support. And it should not be dependent. Her treatment should not be dependent on whether or not she's ready to have a baby. And like I was talking about earlier, push, push, push to get to that point.
Yes, yes. Because I mean, really and truly, like if we have low androgens, our bone health is affected, our, our memory, our cognition, our libido, all of the things. And I mean, for people that have been on a fertility or infertility journey, you know, keeping the intimacy not feeling like a chore or just something to
Mm,
do during the fertile window, I'm sure can already be a struggle. And so, when you have these low hormones happening too, you're decreasing the woman's libido, you're not giving the marital intimacy that could be there.
mm.
There's just so many benefits that even if a child doesn't necessarily come from us replacing these things, maybe not even the desire at the moment, you know, getting those hormones where they need to be if she's in the proper phase of life for that is just gonna, yeah, it's just gonna be life-giving.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's good to remember though that our bodies do have a natural timeline. And so sometimes in this day and age, like we live in a culture where starting to have a family at age 35 to 45, people trying for their very first child in that window of age can be kind of normal because it's like they've done
Mm,
their career path and all the things. And I do think we have to recognize that our hormones do naturally decline, as
yeah.
we're approaching menopause. And that's not something deficient with our body. Like that's just the way it is made. And so, we can help and support and augment some of those things if there is a fertility desire. But at the same time, you know, we can't reverse the clock. Um,
Yeah.
so, I think that those things are also good to keep in mind that this is a normal process if if
Yeah.
if we're in that stage of life.
Such an important reminder. There's a difference between supporting, restoring, preserving, and manipulating or
Right.
forcing something, like trying to create these optimal environments. Well, they're never actually going to be optimal if we're already past that time in life, but we're just trying to take medications to make it happen. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you being on and chatting about these things together. I hope we can do more of these just because, like I said, I always feel like they're fruitful conversations. And now you're also starting your own thing. So if anyone in the state of Alabama is interested in working with you as a restorative reproductive nurse practitioner, they have a way to do that.
Yes. Yeah. So I just recently started with my Catholic doctor. And so I have a page on there that has a link to my scheduling page and all the things. So I'm excited to be able to see my patients in Alabama in another way now.
That's right. Well, listeners, as always, thanks for listening as we continue to explore together what it means to be woven well.